Parsha 101. This week's Parsha is Parshas Va'era. And it's actually not from the first pasuk, not the first verse, but from the second verse of Va'era el Avram el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov. And I appeared to Avram, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov. And this is now God is continuing his response from the end of last week's Parsha, where Moshe said to God, why have you mistreated his people? Since I came, everything got harder. All the work got harder, the slavery got harder. What are we doing here? So now God is, he speaks very firmly to say, I'm God, listen up here. Here's the way things are going to work out, and everything is going to work out. The forefathers, your forefathers, they never doubted me. They had absolute faith in me, even though sometimes what I commanded them seemed to be different than what I had promised them. But they stuck with me. They listened, and you gotta take a step up in your faith a little bit. Now, God says a lot of stuff right now, but just a few things. We have Va'era means, I appeared, but it's also like I've been seen, because part of what's about to happen now is with the plagues that are going to occur beginning in this week's Parsha and then continuing in next week's portion, which is a little fun fact. Va'era is spelled Vav, Aleph, Resh, Aleph. And the first two letters, the Vav and the Aleph, Vav has a numerical equivalent of 6, and the Aleph has a numerical equivalent of 1. So 6 and 1 is 7. There's going to be 7 plagues in this week's Parsha. And next week's Parsha, which is called Bo, Bet is 2 and Aleph is 1. That's 3. There's 3 plagues in next week's Parsha. Just fun fact, if you know the names of the Parsha. So in this one, going back to God's response now, God used a lot of language of redemption. And some of the words that he uses, and these are just snippets from the verses, he says, V'otzei eschem, I'll take you out. V'yitzalti eschem, I'm going to save you. V'ga'alti eschem, I'm going to redeem you. V'lekachti eschem, I'll take you. First, otzei is more like bring you. So v'otzei eschem, I will bring you out. V'yitzalti, I will save you. V'ga'alti, I will redeem you. V'lekachti, I will take you out. And then there's even a 5th phrase that kind of comes a little bit later that says ve'vesi eschem, like I will bring you. Then I'm going to bring you to the land of Israel. But those first 4, which are words of redemption, correlate to the 4 cups of wine at the Seder on Pesach. Another thing that's being told here that's kind of hinted at in God's response is that this whole redemption, the whole slavery that occurred is to lead up to the redemption, which would have a great revelation of godliness that is actually a revelation that even the forefathers didn't experience, right? Because they're about to become a nation and experience the giving of the Torah, which is like the culmination of all of creation. So this is all part of God's response now to Moses' question of, why have you mistreated people? So Moshe goes to relay the message to the people, but they're at this point they're too dispirited and broken down a little bit they don't really listen to him. So Moshe comes back to God, and God says, okay, listen up, okay? He tells Moshe and Aaron, you guys are going to go to Paro now. You're going to speak to Pharaoh. And so why is Pharaoh going to listen to us? If the people didn't listen to us. And God's like, okay, here's how you got to talk to them, right? I'm going to tell you what you got to say when you go to them. When you go to speak to Pharaoh and to the people. Now here, the portion actually breaks a little bit to start going through the lineage. It only goes through the first 3 sons of Yaakov, so it's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, which, if you remember from 2 Torah portions ago, those are the 3 sons that when Yaakov said the blessings, those 3 sons are the ones that were rebuked. Before, and the other son, Yehuda, who's the 4th son, is the one that Yaakov heaped all the blessings upon him and continued with the blessings from there. So these 3 sons, it's kind of reaffirming that they're still the sons of Yaakov, and they're still part of the clan. And it's also because it only needs to go to Levi to establish Moshe and Aaron's lineage. Because that's kind of what's occurring now, we got to show you where their place is among the people and like why these people have been chosen. You're like, who are they? Where they come from? So Moshe and Aaron come from the tribe of Levi, right? They're Levites. And that's why they're going to have the Levite dynasty, the priests, they're all going to come from this tribe. And Levi had 3 sons of Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, which we learn much more about them according to what their tasks were in the tabernacle. So Moshe and Aaron, they come from Kahas, the family of Kahas. That's the middle family. And so their father is Amram, and Amram is from Kahas. It also tells us here that Aaron marries someone named Elisheva, who was the sister of Nachshon ben Aminadav, who also we have something about him in the next week's portion. We're going to hear about him again. And the commentaries say that the reason why he's telling us who her brother is that when someone's looking to marry a woman, he should check out who her brothers are. Now, Aaron and Elisheva have 4 sons. This is all being listed here. So you have Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar. So Nadav and Avihu, we're gonna get to them much later on. Elazar is actually the one who takes over after Aaron, and tells us that Elazar gets married and he has a son named Pinchas. Also Pinchas, he's got his own Torah portion. So there's a lot of setting up the lineage and a lot of names that we're actually going to get back to, or that we're going to see again as the stories keep unfolding. But it kind of is just telling this to us with Moshe and Aaron. It wants to show they both played an equally integral role within the redemption, just showing where they are among the people. So now we return to the narrative that Hashem tells them to go to Pharaoh. Like, I'm going to make you a master over Pharaoh. You have to speak strongly to him. Moshe, you speak to him in Hebrew, and Aaron's going to translate for you. And Moshe, when you speak, even though you had a speech impediment, you'll speak clearly. Make sure and just know that everything that's about to happen is I'm going to reveal that I'm God. I'm going to reveal my signs and my wonders are revealed to the land. And all of this is that we're now going to see God peeking out from nature. We're now going to see God not just this deity, this being that exists beyond nature, but a being that exists within nature, above nature, controls nature, all that kind of stuff, which is part of what the plagues are all about, what they're going to show us about him. So Moshe and Aaron are now going to go to Pharaoh, and Moshe he's just before 80 years old, and Aaron is 83 years old. Now the elders, the Zakanim, the elders of the tribe, they're supposed to go with them, but as they got closer and closer, they kind of chickened out, and they didn't end up appearing with them before Pharaoh. So their whole entourage kind of backed out on them, which later on they didn't get to go as high up the mountain. When the Torah was given, the elders were like, no, you got to stay there because you chickened out before. Anyway, so they go to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's like, all right, give me a sign. So Aaron, as he'd been instructed by God, throws down his staff, and it turns into a serpent. And Pharaoh's like, okay, not impressive. My wise men, my magicians, my necromancers can do the same thing. And they do, because we have that magic did exist in Egypt. That's part of one of the things that changed with the Exodus. They say that a lot of magic kind of died then. Also, it was considered kind of like a black magic, so it was exactly a positive thing. Anyway, so their staffs did turn into serpents, but Aaron's staff, which turned back into a staff, wasn't a serpent anymore, swallowed up their staffs as serpents, even though it was a staff. So Aaron's staff swallowed up the serpents, and it looked unchanged. And still, they're like, nah, he's just got a new magic trick, like a better magic trick than us. But it's probably still magic what he's doing. So Pharaoh hardened his heart and he said, nah, you guys aren't going anywhere. So God said, okay, he's not listening. It's time to bring out the punishments. In general, there was sort of a pattern with the plagues. Every plague officially lasted for about the time frame was about a month, because it would be about 3 weeks of warning and then 1 week of the actual plague. And then there was also a pattern in that there's like 3, 3, and 3. So like the first plague, and then the 10th plague, which is the death of the firstborn, is kind of like its own thing. So you have first, for like the first, the fourth, and the 7th, Moshe and Aaron, they had to go meet Pharaoh at the Nile River, right? Because he used to go out to the Nile River in the morning to go take care of his needs, because he wanted to pretend like he was a god, and a god never has to relieve himself. So that's why he would take care of all of his stuff in the morning when he was alone and no one was around, and that's when they went to ambush him, to catch him there alone. The second warning, the second plague of the set, so number 2, 5, and 8, the warning occurred in the palace, and then the third one, it doesn't say specifically, where the warnings occurred. So Moshe and Aaron go. They're supposed to send the bank opposite Pharaoh and say, all right, God said, let my people go so that they can serve me. Right? A lot of people forget to finish the sentence. Say, God, Moses said, let my people go. It's like, Moses said, let my people go so that they may serve God. Right? That was the reason for the Exodus, to become a nation unto God and to become servants unto God. So let my people go. Look, we're going to go to the wilderness and we'll serve God in the wilderness. And Pharaoh obviously was like, man, not going to do it. So after 3 weeks of warning that the river's going to turn to blood, the fish are going to die, it's going to become putrid, it's going to be disgusting, Pharaoh still didn't give in. And so Aaron raised his staff, and all the water in Egypt, so you're talking about in baths and in vessels and in ponds, not just the Nile River, even though the Nile River was the main target, I guess you could say, because the Egyptians worshipped it as, the Nile River gives us water and it gives us life and sustenance and all that kind of stuff. And it was a deity to them, so it was mainly struck to show God's because God is asserting himself now. But all the water everywhere turned to blood. Even the water that was in Goshen, where the Jewish people lived, that also turned to blood. The difference is that the Jewish people, because if not, Pharaoh would be like, oh, look, our Nile God, see, it's impervious over here. Your God can't reach here. So that part still turned to blood. The difference is that the Jewish people were able to dig wells and get fresh water. The Egyptians were not able to do that. Now, Pharaoh's like, meh, my necromancers, my magician people can also turn water into blood. And they did. They actually did. So they just dismissed everything as magic, and who cares anyways. So also he hardens his heart, and he decides he's not going to let the people go. So now we have the next plague. Now in general, also as a general thing, we have the first 3 plagues, God's going to assert and show his existence. Right? Oh, you think I'm just, if I do exist, I'm just out there? Like, no, I'm here. Like, here I am. The next 4 to 6 plague, the next 3 plagues, which are 4 to 6, God's going to assert his providence over nature and over, see how I exist within the world. And then 7 to 9, God was going to just show his ultimate power. Like, see, look what I could do. That's how in general the plagues play out. So now the next plague is the plague of frogs, and Moses comes to Pharaoh in the palace, said, let my people go so they can serve me, or everything's going to be covered with frogs. They're going to be in your palace, they're going to be in the bed, they're going to be in your ovens and the kneading doughs, they're going to jump alive into your stomachs and croak from there. And Pharaoh's like, meh, not doing it. So Aaron also raised out a staff over the rivers and the canals, etc., and a massive frog. Instead, the plague of frogs came. They say that it was a massive frog jumped out and went to hit it. It just split into swarms and swarms of frogs. They were everywhere. And Pharaoh's like, all right, my necromancers could do the same thing. They could also create a frog and have many frogs, and they did. The magician, they were able to do that all through magic also. But still, the frogs are driving everybody crazy. He said, okay, get rid of them, and I'll consider letting your people go. So he didn't get rid of them, they all died. So it stunk. The land of Egypt just smelled horrifically. And there were still also frogs remained alive within the Nile River as a reminder, like, see what we did here? Remember these guys? But still, Pharaoh hardened his heart, and he didn't let them go. Now, the third plague of lice, is that Aaron was supposed to raise up his staff and strike the dust, right? And all the dust in the land of Egypt would turn to lice. This is the first plague that the necromancers and magicians cannot duplicate, because they cannot work any magic on anything smaller than a barley corn. So man and beast are crawling with lice, and at this point, the magicians and necromancers turn to Pharaoh and say, this is Etzbel Kimhi, this is the finger of God at work here. Still, Pharaoh didn't listen. Now, these first 3 plagues were initiated by Aaron, because 1 and 2 were directly affected the Nile River, and the Nile River had saved Moses, right? When he was put in the basket, the river had saved him. So to show the lengths of what we call a karsa tov, which is recognition of good and gratitude of good that someone does for you, Moses was not the one who initiated those plagues. Now with the lice, that was the dust. This was because in the last portion, remember that Moses struck down the Egyptian, then he had to bury him. So this dust, the dust of the land, had hid the body, right? So it's also, Moses did not initiate that plague. Now, so of course, so Pharaoh's still not listening, so now we have the place of Arab, which is the wild beast. Right? So they went to him, and this is now number 4. So they go in the morning to the Nile River, and they warn Pharaoh, let my people go so they may serve me, right? So they may serve God. And Pharaoh's like, meh, not gonna happen. And so they warn, there's gonna be beasts and snakes and scorpions, and they're all gonna come together. So instead of like this species, like first we're gonna see the lions are gonna come, and then the snakes are gonna slither. It's like, no, everything's gonna come in this massive, freaky tangle of animals. They're just gonna converge upon Egypt. This is the first plague that was distinctly not gonna happen in Goshen, which is where the Jewish people lived. That it was not gonna occur there. So you should really see the division now between you who are being punished for what you've done, and for the rest of and for the people who are going to become my people. Now, this one also, there was no actual action by Moshe or Aaron. Nobody raised up a staff for anything to happen. It was just, God's going to make this happen, and the plague occurred. Pharaoh finally said, okay, why don't you take them all away, and why don't you serve God here? I'll let you, free you all to serve God here. You can worship your God, and everything's fine. right? And Moses said, we can't do that because we're going to be sacrificing animals. We're going to sacrifice these lambs, and you all worship lambs. They're your deities. So that's not going to make, people are not going to be happy with us if we do that. So it's not happening. We want to get out of here. But finally, but he said, but he did pray for the plague to go away. And instead of them, all the animals dying or something like that with the frogs, the animals, they went away. Like they were gone. Because if not, if you had a bunch of dead animals like that, the Egyptians would have benefited from the fur, from the hides of the animal. They would have made themselves snakeskin cowboy boots or whatever, right? Or purses, or crocodile purses, or whatever it was. So instead, all the animals were gone. Nothing remained from them. Obviously, Pharaoh changed his mind, so now we have the next plague. The next plague is Dever, which is kind of like an epidemic, like an animal sickness, right? Moshe and Aaron go to warn Pharaoh, let my people go so they can serve me, so they can serve God. And then they say all the livestock in the field, they say the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the cattle, the flocks, all of it are going to be struck by this sickness. Tomorrow, it's going to happen tomorrow that they're all going to be struck by the sickness. Now, kind of what the wording is to show that if anybody would listen and actually bring their animals in from the field, then those animals would be protected. And so some of the people at that point, they caught on her and they're like, okay, let's get our animals in. Let's listen to what's going on here and let's save ourselves. And anybody who brought their animals in, they kept them in the barns and they kept them, in their homes or wherever, those animals survived and were not struck by this epidemic. Now, also, we're told very specifically that no animals died from the Jewish people, from the Jewish people. So their flocks, their cattle, all of them, no matter where they were all fine. Here also for this plague, Moshe and Aaron, nobody raised up a staff. There was nothing that was done. This is just something that God brought about. So of course we go through the whole back and forth, and Pharaoh changes his mind and they're not going free. Okay. Now we have the next plague, the plague of Shchim, translated as boils or like mass inflammation. And there's not enough turmeric in the world to save them on this one. There was also very miraculous means. The plague itself was miraculous, and also the means was very miraculous in bringing it about. So God told Moshe and Aaron, both of you take two massive handfuls. Take 2 handfuls of soot from a very hot kiln, right? Now put all 4 of those handfuls into one of Moshe's hands. So he was going to hold all 4 handfuls in one hand. Now throw it up heavenward before Paro, and it's going to cover. Right, it wasn't really enough for that. First of all, how we could hold all 4 in one hand, and also that it would cover so far. It was going to cover and settle like dust over the land of Egypt, and all the men and all the animals specifically animals that were in the field, were going to be covered in it. And even though this soot had now cooled down and all that sort of stuff, it was still going to start causing blistering on them, not only wherever it touched, but all over them. And this plague, it says that the necromancers, the magicians, they can no longer stand before Moshe. Not just because they actually couldn't stand because of the boils and inflammation, but at this point they were just embarrassed to stand before him because he had so outpaced them in the quote-unquote magic he was doing, even though they were now recognizing there was a much higher force at play here. Now, until here, Pharaoh had hardened his own heart, being stubborn and not letting the people go. This plague specifically says that God now hardened Pharaoh's heart. So technically Pharaoh still could have repented, he still could have done a turnaround. It would have just been much harder for him, but at this point now he had been so stubborn that God's like, now I'm hardening your heart because of your own stubbornness now. So now there's more punishment coming your way because of the way you've been behaving. Now we have the 7th plague, which is the last plague mentioned in this Torah portion. It's the end of this Torah portion, is the plague of hail. So this one actually did not come with a warning. It was just, he was going to be informed, go tell Pharaoh this is what's going to happen, and demand that he set the people free. And he went to tell him, I could strike all of you down with the same plague that killed all the animals, but I'm keeping you alive so that my name is going to be known throughout the world. Like everyone, the entire land of Egypt is going to know the name of God, and the world beyond will know the name of God. And as Moshe spoke, he made a scratch on a wall. He made a mark on the wall. He said, exactly at this time, when the sun hits this line tomorrow, that is when there's going to be hail like has never been seen in Egypt since its founding. And send out word that people and animals should get inside or they're going to die. Right? Whoever's outside is gone. Whoever's inside is going to die. Now, there were a lot of people who were still listening at this point, and they're like, all right, let's get inside. And there were a lot of people who are still kind of, man, they don't care. And they stayed outside. And guess what happened to them? Now, Moses now raised your staff heavenward and great thunder and hail and fire and lightning started to occur. And they say that it was actually fire was inside of the hail. So you had a hard ice shell kind of for the hail, and then inside was a burning fire. And even though fire, first of all, does not go downward, it goes upward, and ice should melt fire, fire and ice should dry ice, it didn't make sense that the two of them should coexist. It says, Rashi, who's the foremost commentator of the Torah, says that it was a miracle within a miracle occurred, that these two opposing forces made peace between themselves to do the will of the Creator. That this is what God wanted, that there should be hail like this. And so, they quote unquote, they put aside their differences so that this hail could occur. And it wrecked the land of Egypt. People's, animals, plants, everything, anything that was outdoors was gone, except none of it fell in the land of Goshen, which where the Jewish people lived. Now, Pharaoh calls to Moshe and Aaron, and he admits himself. He says, I've sinned, I did wrong, I should have listened. God is righteous, and he knows what he's talking about. And make this all go away. So Moshe goes out of the city, and he spreads out his hands. And it says that as he prayed, wherever the hail was, it froze in its place. It actually stopped mid-fall. It also says that all the flax and barley, which by then had already ripened, were totally crushed. So that's cutting out a lot of the food supply. And then wheat and spelt, which hadn't yet fully ripened, so because it was a younger shoot, it was more pliable, so that was not destroyed. Now, obviously, once that's all done, Pharaoh changes his mind, and the continuation of the story is for next week's Torah portion.